So what we will then find, though, as a result, though, when we're critiquing modern society, and then I'll point this in as the fourth point down here, is that what we then need to do is not so much hold out hope that socialism is going to come, or at least the Marxist version of socialism is going to come. We're still crushed to some extent by the failure of Marxism to work its way out. And to the extent that the capitalist societies still seem to be going along and in a quasi-progressive direction here, what we need to do is abandon our predictions that socialism is in the future, to realize that there probably is not ever going to be a happy ever after version of society, that these group conflicts are likely to go on along indefinitely here. Instead, what we need to do is focus our efforts critically, that is to say negatively, against contemporary society, critiquing it, making people aware of these conflicts that are going on, and undermining the modernist self-congratulatory story about making progress in any one of these areas here. So what we need to do then is focus on a critique of all dimensions of modern society. And so modern society is not simply characterized by a set of economic arrangements, it's also characterized by gender dynamics, by sexual dynamics, by political dynamics, by linguistic dynamics, by a relationship between us and other environmental species and so forth. Modern society as a multidimensional society is what we as postmodernists are going to be against in all of its manifestations, and we're focusing our efforts on critiquing those in a totalistic fashion as much as possible. But what we should find, though, is that the dimension, if we put a number of these things together here, is that we should find that the way modern society works is that it privileges some of these groups at the expense of other groups, that the way modern society actually has played out against its rhetoric of expanding liberty and equality for all, is that it's white people who are at the top of the heap, and anybody who is a non-white is then at the bottom of the heap or marginalized from the mainstreams of wealth and power. It is males who are increasingly at the top of the heap, and it is increasingly or continually females, right, who are marginalized or pushed down the hierarchy here. It is going to be people, we can say, of kind of Anglo-Saxon and Protestant backgrounds that become privileged here. So I'll just say Anglo-Saxon Protestants here, and so what we have then is non-Anglo-Saxon Protestants, that is to say anybody who's not an Anglo, not a European, so to speak, or at least a European influenced primarily by the Anglo way of thinking, the British Enlightenment and Scottish Enlightenment and so forth, and anybody who doesn't fit the dominant Christian, perhaps Protestant model here is going to be marginalized here as well. This model here also privileges a heterosexuality, says it should be males and females in monogamous marital relationships. That's the proper and approved form of sexual behavior. What then gets marginalized is various forms of alternative sexualities, including homosexuality, right, and so forth. And what we also then will find is that we privilege ourselves. We say that we human beings are the most important. We're going to advance our interests, and what we are then doing from the environmental angle here, going to argue that all other species are merely commodities for our use. We can exterminate them, use them, enslave them, and so forth, however we want. So what we then are going to do then is to recognize, if we take point 3 about the splinter groups, is we have all of these groups operative here. For some people, obviously, their being white is more important, or their sexuality is more important, or their Protestant religion is being more important. And so it's not necessarily the case that in any given society that what's going on in the United States is exactly the same as what's going on in Germany, right, or Japan, right, and so forth. Which of these conflicts is more prevalent in any given society at any given time? That's a historically contingent matter. But nonetheless, what we do have is, broadly speaking, these groups in various forms of coalitions are dominating these groups in various sort of coalitions. And so what we need to do is, as postmodernists, recognize that this dynamic is in place, identify ourselves with this group here. These are the historically oppressed groups. We should see ourselves as advocating them, trying to bring them into more of a position of equality, but then at the same time being more critical of anybody who is in these groups and critical of the kinds of narratives and the kinds of accounts that give precedence to these or seem to be privileging accounts that are self-congratulatory or trying to tell good news stories about modern societies that only play up the achievements of people in these particular groups. All right, that then means that what we will be doing is making various theoretical adjustments to the Marxist models. We're retaining the zero-sum issue, we're retaining the conflict model, the power struggle issues, we're retaining the group analyses. We are, however, broadening it. We're not claiming that there's going to be one story that fits all societies in terms of all of their developments. We're going to have to adapt the rhetorical battle depending on the society that we find ourselves in. We're looking at smaller subdivisions of the human species, and we are abandoning the idealism that came along with Marxism and going to be devoting ourselves to what we take to be critiquing the negative elements of the modernist project, and hopefully through that critique paving the way for a postmodern kind of future.